I got my grubby, inky hands on An Ember in the Ashes recently, and this book is interesting enough to me and also pretty popular enough that it warrants putting my own opinion out there. So yeah, here's my review of the first book in that series, which I have never read before. When I get into spoilers, I'll let you know on the screen, so even if you haven't read it, you can still enjoy this review. The premise of this book is two main characters, one Laia, who is a slave, and the other one Elias, who is an assassin soldier, are both held captive by the Martial Empire, but in different ways. Laia's family was killed by a mask, the name of the assassin Elias is being trained to be, and then seeks out her revenge and also to save the people she cares about by looking for the rebellion, the Scholar Rebellion. Meanwhile, Elias is inside Blackcliff Academy. He is planning to desert the academy, but that's not looking so easy since he's leaving all the people he's known his whole life behind, and if he gets caught, he's dead. That's where the two main characters' stories begin, and it's a great start, especially since it's in dual POV, dual perspective. Each chapter switches between Elias and Laia. That's not a new concept or format whatsoever, but I haven't read many books that do this, so to me it felt fresh and awesome. Starting a chapter from Laia's perspective, and let's say that chapter ends on a cliffhanger, it then switches to Elias's story, and I don't get to see what happened to Laia until I finish Elias's chapter. And then if Elias's chapter also ends on a cliffhanger, now I want to know the solution to two cliffhangers. I liked how the pacing of the story never slows down because of this. The Ember in the Ashes series is probably, now I realize, most known for how rich, compelling, and fresh the world building is. It may seem fresher to me because the lore of the story is inspired by Middle Eastern culture, a culture which is not represented enough. That's it for the non-spoiler part of the plot. The 5-star rating that Goodreads uses is kind of too rigid for me, so I'm using out of 10. This is a light 9. A light 9. And I'll explain more of why I give it such a high rating in this spoiler part. Right after I'm done talking about the plot, I'll move on to characters and we'll let you know the spoilers are over. Connected to how the lore and history is so important, as it should be, to the plot and also to character motivations, I want to talk about the augurs. Augurs. It's spelled like this. I'm gonna pronounce it the way I pronounced it in my head when I was reading the book, which is augurs. I love it when an element of the story or a specific antagonistic force is lightly mentioned by different characters so you can have an expectation of them. In the beginning of the book, the augurs are mentioned very skeptically by Elias because the Marshals hold them in such high regard as these eternal, immortal beings that can read minds and see the future. But Elias believes that they're false gods, basically, and that they're just trying to trick everybody. If I was in a situation in that world and had never seen these augurs, but everybody just holds them in such high regard, I would feel the same way. So I like how there's a distinction, like all the magical supernatural things aren't just pushed into the same box, and all the groups of people in this world don't just believe the same things. There are some things you choose to believe and some things that seem believable you choose not to, and that's just really cool and realistic. Not only do I like how different people believe or don't believe in the augurs and their first impressions, I like when they're in the story. I find them very fascinating. Near the end of the book, realizing just how much the augurs knew about everything and how much they were planning was super cool. My favorite parts of the story were the trials. The trials were so tense and scary, and also allowed us to get to know more about Elias and Helene. Helene, I love you. The other part I love most was the spying parts. I've never seen such a brutal kind of depiction of slavery, fantasy slavery. It just felt so real and consequential and awful from Laia's perspective. The other slaves, Cook and Kitchen Girl, their fears of the Commandant, which are so obvious, become more and more understandable the more time Laia spends as a slave. It doesn't feel like she has plot armor or, protagonist syndrome where nothing bad really happens to her. Things happen to her. Bad things happen to her. because she's in a terrible situation where no one sees her as a person, as a human, because she's a scholar and a slave, and a girl. It was exciting to me. Just as exciting as Elias fighting the trials was, just in different ways. The fighting was super just morbid and scary, the same way Elias feels about his situation. His heart is too kind to be doing the things that the Academy expects him to do, which makes the things he does do all that more, you know, oh no, because of how he feels about it. And I think that's the end of explanations for why I like the plot so much, because I'm starting to talk more about characters now. What makes the characters so good or so bad? We'll see. So without saying who it involves, there is a love triangle, of course, in this book, in the series, and I'm really not a fan of love triangles. I understand that they could be done well, but most of the times they're just like, okay, whatever, pick a dude or don't pick a dude. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't relate to it. Oh, but he has a kind soul. Oh, but he has rugged good looks. He understands me more. Oh, but he makes me laugh, so who could I choose? I didn't like that element of the three characters that were involved in it. It kind of detracted points from my likability of them. I'm fine with like romance in a fantasy world. I guess it makes sense for these teenagers to find love and friendship despite hardship and all the things going on around them. Like that's not annoying or anything. What is annoying is being indecisive and misleading to other people. I love how Laia is a coward and a normal person and doubts herself and just gets super scared when bad things keep happening to her, because things do go wrong a lot. I also like how Elias isn't just this saint surrounded by an entire school of ruthless killers. It feels much more real and impactful for him to be choosing the right path when he would be so good at being evil if he chose to be evil. A character with a tormented past who has done bad things, choosing instead to do the right thing because he wants to save his own soul and redeem himself. That is a very interesting character, and I want to see where he goes very much. I also love the side characters that are actually important to the plot. Even the antagonists have parts of them that aren't evil. No one is literally born just maniacally laughing and plotting murder. Everyone has a backstory. Everyone has something either about the world around them or about experiences they've had that have shaped them into who they are now. I'm a bigger fan of Elias and Helene for being super layered and flawed, compared to Laia, whose arc is basically like going from the coward to the chosen one, compelled by her family being killed. Like, I've seen this before, you know? What did feel cheap was how other characters react to Laia, mostly positively. I just didn't like how, even though she is doing somewhat brave things, she's still seen through this lens of being the damsel in distress. There didn't seem to be much more to Laia beyond what happened to her and her family. I enjoy Elias's story more than I do Laia. Even though I care about what happens to Laia, Laia just feels like a, oh, must get revenge, and also the chosen one, and I'm so pretty, guys. Eventually I'm gonna be like the greatest ever. Like, you can tell this is the beginning of my journey to being the greatest leader of all time. I don't know. I've seen it before. It's only the first book out of like, what, 5? So there's a lot more to the story and to the characters. I have been talking for a very long time. It's gotten steadily darker. I don't know how long this video is gonna be, but trust me, it's probably much shorter than my overall rant was.